saying thanks to all of you. Some of you have great heat, particularly this particular heat in Delhi and Delhi. To listen to a very good scholar, Dr. Tamara, who's going to speak on the Silk Road idea and things like what is going on. Now, the Silk Road has been of interest to people for several years, but much of the time, most people believe that the Silk Road was nothing but a trade route beginning in China and through India, South Asia, Persia, going to Europe. And most people wrote on the trade and diplomacy that happened there. It was later we discovered that there was much more to it than just the trade route, especially Valerie Hansen's writings from Yale University. The book came out in 2015, which she's been writing earlier. She said that trade was only one part of it. Much of it was, interactions, cultural interactions, people. So she said that people-to-people relations existed in the past, especially in the pre-nation-state period. It was a Silk Road. So, although I haven't read the book, but I read about it. But here, Professor Singh will probably enlighten us about the idea of the Silk Road, because we all know it was a German scholar who invented the term. But in addition to that, there are many other interesting things about religion and the idea of the Silk Road, especially in this book. So, over to you. I'm not giving an introduction. She's associate professor in Brown University. We have, this notice. We have a short version of her CV, so you will go here. So over to you. We'll speak for about 45 minutes and then we go.
Well, thank you very much to the Institute for Chinese Studies for this generous invitation and to the introduction. I'm very honored to be here, and thank you again for coming with the heat to hear me speak. Today's talk is part of a book in progress, so I welcome all feedback, however critical. So thank you very much. So let me introduce today's talk with a map that's maybe familiar to many of you. As the key shows down here, it's actually a palimpsest of two maps. There's the new Silk Road, the Silk Road Economic Belt and Maritime Silk Road, or the Belt Road Initiative in slightly darker red and blue. And there is the old Silk Road in lighter pink and blue. That is the ancient network that Professor Chakrabarti just mentioned of trade and exchange and various types of interactions, a kind of connected history, if you will, that's largely studied in the humanities amongst cultural historians. What I'd like to talk about today is how the old Silk Road, as well as the new Silk Road, are modern conceptualizations. Although networks of exchange did exist, this particular way of conceptualizing them on a map and as a historical narrative of something called the Silk Road is something new. And this is a selective trace, it's a much bigger document, of the term itself, Silk Road, in a few languages. Beginning with the coining of the term, outlined in red there, of the Silk Road Design-Straße by the German colonial geographer Ferdinand von Richthofen in 1877, and it goes all the way through to the Belt Road Initiative today. So there was no ancient term for the Silk Road in Greek or Latin or Sanskrit or classical Chinese. I've divided up this history of the modern idea of something called the Silk Road into three distinct phases as a sort of history of the concept. And this will become clear as I give my talk. Now, the first phase on the far left there is 1877 to 1945 period of new imperialism and the world wars, during which time the term largely circulated in Western European geography and geographical discourse. It's coined in German, it enters French and English in translation. It doesn't circulate very much in Chinese or Japanese. There are some paraphrases or non-standardized translations that appear in the 20s and 30s and 40s, but it's not a popular idiomatic term as it is in English, French, and German during this period. Before I move on to that, the popularization of the term is by this person, Sven Hedin, who I'll talk about, a Swedish explorer in the 20s and 30s. Once you hit the Cold War and decolonization, the sort of post-war, post-Second World War period, there's a radical shift in the ways in which people talk about something called the Silk Road. And it can be sort of split into the two sides of the Iron Curtain and what became called the Color Curtain after the Bandung Afro-Asian movement and the non-aligned movement. So in the West, in Europe, US, and Japan, on the one hand, you get an idea of the Silk Road that's similar to how it began, that has to do with a Silk Road spanning Europe and Asia, an East-West Silk Road that we're familiar with today. And it appears in novels and films, historical studies, and in museum exhibitions that you can still see today. On the other hand, in China, what happened after the first Afro-Asian conference in Bandung, Indonesia in 1955 is a new signification, a new conceptualization of the term Silk Road, a standard use. This is when the term first becomes idiomatic in Chinese. And that's not many people realize this. There's a different history of the term Silk Road in Chinese than in the West. And it was coined in a very specific context of China's Third World or Afro-Asian diplomacy with the decolonized world under Mao during this period. That's the context of how it circulates in China versus Europe and the US and Japan. After the rapprochement between China and the West in 1972, after Richard Nixon visits China, then this idea, what one might call the Afro-Asian Silk Road, disappears. And I'll talk about this in detail as we come along. I'm just giving you a sketch. And one starts getting, in China's diplomacy with the West, the kind of Silk Road, East-West, Europe-Asia idea that had already been circulating in the West. And it appears in the arts and humanities, through UNESCO projects, and then through these global infrastructure projects, which I think many of you know more about, leading up to 2030 Belt Road Initiative, or One Belt, One Road, that has made the Silk Road so well known today. So that's the phase. And I'll look at them in turn, but I'll look at the first two phases. The book I'm working on actually ends around 1970, because as I said, I'm a cultural historian. I don't work on the contemporary present. So the basic points that I'll make through this talk are that the Silk Road is a set of modern political ideas and narratives. Second, that during the Cold War era, there were two ideas of the Silk Road. And third, China's anti-colonial version of this Afro-Asian Silk Road and the way it talked about Indian Ocean ties from the pre-modern period. This model that I'll explain in a minute disappeared from 1972 onwards. And so this is just part of the inheritance that I would like to talk about. So this is the map on which the Silk Road first appears, die Seidenstraße in Germany. If you look at the key that is on the map, it shows two sets of color-coded lines. In red, as the key says, the red names and lines show the geography of the lands of colony Serica and the Silk Road environment. So this is the first way in which this German geographer introduces the term Silk Road. Ptolemy and Marinus were Greco-Roman geographers whose maps became the basis for European scientific cartography. Again, there's no ancient Greek term for the Silk Road, but Richthofen coins the term the Silk Road of Marinus and Ptolemy, as a way of talking about the easternmost limits of Greek and Roman knowledge. Now this is an important bit. He says the blue color here shows everything obtained from Chinese sources, in particular the Han Dynasty annals, and that's the blue section up there. And Richthofen was amongst the first in the modern European mapping of Central Asia to assert the scientific value of classical Chinese texts. So he controversially argued that Greek and Latin knowledge wasn't enough, which in the 19th century was controversial. And he used the empirical data from the Hanshul, the Shiji, that is the ancient Chinese historical annals, to revise the map of the ancient world. So Richthofen's Silk Road, this first Silk Road, wasn't the kind of cultural bridge between East and West as it is today, but it was a measurable route that, on this map, as you can see here, emphasized the need to correct the map between Siam in Western China and Bactra in Afghanistan. It was a specific area that he wanted to use ancient Chinese records to correct. Now, why did he want to do this? Richthofen was the first person to scientifically undertake a scientific geological survey of China in the 1960s. He was sponsored by the German Colonial Office and by various Western corporations to find coal and other mineral deposits in order to introduce railways into China. And that he went in the 1960s, and he argued in 1872 that little doubt would exist that eventually China would be connected with Europe by rail. Again, this is just what's happened with the Belt Road Initiative, but over 100 years later. And Richthofen was the geographer who helped guide Germany's annexation of Chinar as a colony in coal-rich Shandong in 1897. And it's in this context that this Silk Road map was one of a series of cartographic studies of this region for some kind of potential future railway between Europe and China that would compete with the kinds of Europe-Asia railway maps that Britain was producing and France was producing using their own colonial empire. So against the kinds of maps that were being produced by the British India at that time to try and find a railway route. This was an alternative railway route. This dream of a Europe to Asia Silk Road was never fulfilled, but one of Richthofen's students, the Swedish explorer Sven Hedin, in the next generation, 1920s, 1930s, undertook, he spearheaded the Sino-Swedish expedition in Xinjiang to map out a potential motor road route between Shanghai and Europe. And again, this is in this context that the Silk Road really became a household term across Europe. His famous book called The Silk Road was translated into multiple languages, Japanese, Swedish, Hungarian, German, and so forth. And he was a good publicist, and this is what happened. And the way in which he saw China's ancient Silk Road as becoming a motor road was again this palimpsest of an ancient trade route that was being a precedent for something new. Again, high-speed, infrastructural, long-distance transport routes between China and the West in the publicization of this term Silk Road. Again, this was another project that wasn't built. And one other important aspect of Sven Hedin's work is that he, unlike Richthofen, saw the Silk Road as something Chinese that began in the Han Dynasty with the Han Dynasty embassies to Central Asia, and that narrative of the Silk Road beginning during the Han Dynasty, going out to the west, is something that begins here and was taken up especially in Chinese as well as European historical studies. For example, Valerie Hansen generally begins the story somewhere like that. After the war, Second World War, that is, we reached the period of the Cold War in the West, and this is when the Silk Road becomes popularized in novels, especially in Japan, as well as this idea of Silk Road music. Those of you who know Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road suites. There's a tradition that arises in the 1950s in Japan. The idea of a Silk Road exhibition that you can sometimes see in museums all across the world. That idea of staging a Silk Road exhibition of these dunhuang murals and paintings and so forth. These kinds of staging of something called the Silk Road were especially popular in Japan in the 50s, which is when the Japanese terms for the Silk Road also became standard and popular. And again, although Japan was part of the Afro-Asian, participated in the Afro-Asian conference in Bandung, Indonesia, and as well as these various other Afro-Asian events, its representation of the Silk Road was very much in line with Europe and the US. Now, I'm just returning here to what's happening on the other side of the Iron Curtain, in particular in China, which I'll focus on. As I mentioned before 1949, it follows European geography. The term itself, again, is not a Chinese term. It enters Chinese through the translation of European geographical texts, but it's a rare term. There's no standard term. After 1955 is when the term that we have today, those terms become standard through state-sponsored historical studies and through state newspapers, and the People's Daily and other standard press. It's limited in Taiwan, which is where the term isn't used much at all until fairly recently. And then much later on, in the post-Cold War period again, this idea that I'll talk about in a minute disappears, and the Chinese use of that term becomes more aligned with what's already circulated in the West. I'll talk about this a little more in a minute. So, many of you will already be very familiar with the first Asia-Africa Conference, Afro-Asian Conference in Bandung, Indonesia, spearheaded by Nehru, amongst other people. What's interesting in this context is the historical imagination at stake. The 29 countries that met for the first time outside of Europe in Bandung, Indonesia, imagined new forms of cooperation across the Iron Curtain, both socialist and non-socialist states. And the idea that they were doing it was not that it was a brave new world, something completely new, but rather that it was based upon an ancient history of cooperation. It goes something like this. So the Asia-Africa Conference was convinced that some of the most powerful ways of understanding amongst nations is the development of cultural cooperation. Asia and Africa have been the cradle of great religions and civilizations which have enriched other cultures and civilizations while themselves being enriched in the process. So this I'm so sorry. So the red is the 5 organizing states. So India, Pakistan, Indonesia, and so forth. And the rest are the invited states that you can see here. So Africa has yet, not until the 1960s, is Africa decolonized, which is why most of them are not there. It was a very controversial conference. Egypt was not colored red because it wasn't one of the organizing states, even though Lacerda became very prominent in the movement after that, especially once Africa becomes decolonized. So yes, so that's the map. Then I think so the one and sorry, China's place in this conference was highly controversial because it was seen as being dangerously a dangerous communist threat. Because most of these states were not communist. So this was another issue. But nonetheless, many of the observers at the time generally acknowledged that Joe and I did a good job in cultural diplomacy at the time, and it sort of was a jump-started the PRC's diplomacy with the Afro-Asian states after that. So a whole spate of new diplomatic ties were established right after the conference. And so what I'm interested in is not the fact. I'm not a political scientist. I'm not interested in the sort of history of that diplomacy, except as the context for this particular way of thinking about contemporary diplomacy as imagined on a bedrock of this ancient intercultural relationship. And I'll explain why in a minute. So they're enriched by other cultures while being enriched with this idea of ancient intercultural relations. Unfortunately, contacts among Asian and African countries are interrupted basically by colonialism, and now, 1955, there's a desire to renew their old cultural contacts. And I marked out these three stages: ancient contact, modern colonial interruption, post-colonial interaction. Because what follows this conference is an outpouring, not only in Chinese newspapers and texts, but also in many of its partner states. This is from the Times of India, this is from Tunisia, this is from the Tanzania Nationalist, this is from the Somali News, Pakistan Times, that's a Chinese publication for Westerners. There's an outpouring this time of this idea of an ancient friendship that has to be renewed. And I think many of you will be familiar with that in a Sino-Indian context. It's the idea that there's this ancient friendship and it has to be renewed at a particular time. And it's in this particular context that China suddenly introduces this term Silk Road. In this context of a much broader set of ancient friendships that China has with all these other Asian and African states. So, for example, if we look at China's relations with Afghanistan immediately after 1955. So again, this is in the People's Daily. You have this is a typical formulation that's sort of coordinated across international press and also within China with other states. There is this trope, a narrative trope. Historically, China and Afghanistan have never had ill will or hatred. Our ancestors opened up cultural and religious relations between the two nations. The Silk Road for commerce. This history of contact was broken off under imperialist aggression, but this obstruction can't happen any longer. The friendship between our two peoples will be revived in a certain way. So this kind of formulation appears again and again in Afghanistan, in the case of Syria, and in the case of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, later Turkey and Iran. That's the five places in which the term Silk Road is inserted. Now I'll talk in a minute about India and other places where you have this trope of ancient friendship, but where the specific term Silk Road is not used on either side, and I'll try and talk about that in a minute. This diplomatic discourse of renewal of this ancient friendship doesn't only occur in diplomacy, it also appears amongst literary scholars and historians, amongst writers. After the first Afro-Asian conference, we have the first Afro-Asian Writers' Conference in Tashkent, Uzbekistan in 1958. And there have been many of these since then. But in this first one, you have on the right here, Mao Dun, who many of you will know very well, one of China's leading writers at the time, who represents the Chinese delegation, who has a new model of world literature that he premises on this idea of an ancient Silk Road. So he says, first of all, as we meet here, we cannot but recall the world-famous Silk Road that passed by here, opened up by this Han-dynasty explorer. We all know that since the 16th century, cultural exchange has been destroyed by colonialism. At this time, many of us were forced to accept other people's so-called civilization and to vilify our own peoples as backward. Our own literary treasures were passed outside of the treasury of world literature. Now, what's important to note here is that Muldoon is talking here to two sets of audiences, both socialists and non-socialists. His speech here goes on to give an account of Chinese literature that spans the beginnings of Chinese literature in the songs, the poetry, the classical odes, and all the way down through Xun and contemporary socialist writing. But in this beginning, when he's talking about world literature, he's not talking about the model of world literature that is promoted by, it's explained by Marx and Engels, who saw that world literature arose with modern capitalism. That is, as national identities become more and more dissolved, so a world literature arises out of many national literatures. That's the sort of the standard account in the Communist Manifesto of the rise of world literature. What we have here is Muldoon saying, well, actually, in my version that I'm telling you about, for Asian conference, this sort of non-aligned version, which is saying, well, actually, we had world literature amongst Asian and African cultures. Back then, with the Silk Road, where we were already starting to read each other's literatures and translating them, this just disappeared precisely under colonial capitalism in the modern period, and now we're rebuilding this set of relations. And this kind of model is found elsewhere. Shirley Graham Du Bois, who is W. Du Bois's partner, who was also at the conference, the two of them were there. They too have this, or she too has this model of this ancient Silk Road of this from China and the Ivory Coast from the Congo. It was this Sino-African relationship was falling apart, and now down here, it's hard for you to see, the separations ended or moved forward. So it's a trope that circulates not only in diplomacy but also in literature at that time. And following this, there was a steep rise within China of translations of Asian and African, and including Sanskrit and modern Indian literature into Chinese. There's the first staging of Shakuntala in 1957 in China. Many of these new projects of introducing Asian and Arab and Arabic and African works happened as a direct consequence of these interactions at these successive Afro-Asian literary conferences. There was an Afro-Asian Writers Bureau that was set up. The issue of this actual use of the term Silk Road can be clarified or illustrated by looking at the difference between the sort of pre-1962 representation of Sino-Indian friendship versus the representation of Chinese relations with Pakistan. The narrative is the same one that I've been showing you all along, but it's only in the case of Pakistan that you have the term Silk Route used. I can talk about that more. But and in the particular case of Pakistan, it was applied to the construction of the Karakoram Highway, which was seen as the reopening of a particular Silk Road. There are complicated reasons for that, which I'll come to in a minute. But as you can see, in the case of Pakistan here, there was the famous Silk Road. In modern times, under colonialism, these relations came to a halt, but we're going to restore this friendship. And then in the case of India, in both the Chinese press and in Indian press, you have friendly contacts between India and China dating back as far as 2 centuries, 2 centuries before Christ. But these contacts were interrupted under Western imperialism, but new channels have been opened. So again, parallel narrative, different terms. Now the use of the term Silk Road or Silk Route in India is, as far as I can tell, this is something I'm still working on, very limited. And there are many reasons for this. I won't go into it. A couple of examples of where it is used is in this description of the first Asian Relations Conference here in Delhi in 1947. There's an account which is at the back of the disc, an imposing map of Asia. This is obviously Mahatma Gandhi and narrate there. In front of it, in the back, was this map showing the air and sea routes, railways, roads, and the Silk Road route. And I'm still trying to find this map, so if any of you know where this map is, I'd be happy to hear. And then in Menon's Delhi Chongqing, what's interesting to note here is he's saying, this is his diary, his travel diary, from traveling from Delhi to Chongqing. He said, and he's in Xinjiang at this moment. So it's Friday, 20th of October. It's exhilarating to think that one is traveling over one of the oldest international routes in history. It used to be known as the Silk Road. Now, he's talking here about this road in Xinjiang. He's not talking about the Sino-Indian road. He's at this point, as he's using the term, there is that. A lot of the studies, other studies, so the 1950s and 1970s, it's largely used in Sino-Pakistan and Sino-Soviet transport infrastructure, like the Karakoram Highway, as well as for some historical accounts of Central Asian trade routes. The preferred terms in India during this earlier period are things like Serindia, which is a term that Oral Stein and that first generation of early 20th century explorers who went to Bengal used. So actually none of those early explorers, Paul Pelliot, Oral Stein, used, or even Count Mapani, the Japanese, they didn't use the term Silk Road. And it's probably out of that context that someone like Bakshi in his Indian-China Thousand Years Cultivation, he uses the term Serindia, he doesn't use Silk Road. Again, brotherhood, Indian friendship, those sorts of terms are far more common as opposed to the Silk Road. Now, this way of, again, using the model of that trope, that narrative trope of reconnection, appears very importantly in talking about the maritime Silk Road. Now, with the Belt Road Initiative, we're all familiar with this idea of a maritime Silk Road that goes to East Africa, that goes to the Middle East, and so forth. That specific phrase, maritime Silk Road, that term does not appear or circulate anywhere until the 1980s, and I think it's through the UNESCO projects that I'm happy to talk about more. However, you have the same narrative used for both the Silk Road, the overland Silk Road, and the seaway, the Haida, or the sea route between China and the outside world in pre-colonial times, that suggests that they were seen as part of the same narrative, the same kind of Afro-Asian history. And this is one example that I won't go into here, but it's used for Sino-Arab friendship. It's again the Silk Road and the seaway through the Indian Ocean that was broken off, and is only after the Afro-Asian conference that it's going to be reconnected. There are many examples of this. I'm just giving you a sample of it just to show you some of the research that I've done, trying to track down the ways in which people talk about this shared history. This is the Somali news. Again, this idea that one particular figure who becomes very important is Zhenghe, the 15th century Chinese navigator whose many journeys across the Indian Ocean went as far as the East African coast. And this is why he becomes so important. After 1965, once with decolonization goes to Africa and China's establishment of a new phase, the first phase of China-Africa relations, this becomes a kind of an emblem of a new set of relations that are already part of an ancient set of relations, of pre-colonial relations. And this is the front page of the Somali News in 1965. This is sort of detailed obscure history of Zhenghe that is somewhat surprising, and it's sort of set up as a new model for thinking about Sino-African relations. Again, in Tanzania, this is our second place where this is a very common trope. President Nyerere in 1965 says, when after independence Tanzania began to establish contact with China, we weren't really doing anything new. We were merely resuming a connection which had been broken off. And in the case of Tanzania, again, there is this way of concretizing economic cooperation through infrastructural investment. And so this is an earlier phase. Those of you who are familiar with Belt and Road Initiative, this is the earlier phase. This is China's largest Cold War era investment project. It was in Tanzania. Not the sort of form of renewal that this diplomatic call came to was the setting up of the China-Tanzania Joint Shipping Company on 66, and then the Uhuru Freedom Railway between Tanzania and Zambia during the apartheid era that was contracted in 1967 and then was built through into the 70s. But again, at least in this earlier period, there was a sense that there was something there to renew. Now, the reason why, again, I'm not a social scientist, the reason why these sorts of narratives are important for me are for the effect they have on academic scholarship, as well as on the literary imagination. The significance of this Cold War era call to reconnect the Silk Road and Indian Ocean history is twofold. First, it did introduce into political discourse a new narrative with which to give meaning to Afro-Asian solidarity. It was a different kind of non-nationalist, a transnational, anti-colonial imagination that asked its audiences to experience cooperation, economic cooperation across Cold War divisions, not just sympathetically as fellow sufferers of European colonialism, but also historically as former collaborators in a shared pre-colonial antiquity. So it was seen as redevelopment projects, not just development projects, as a sort of experience, cultural experience of what was going on. Why give money at a time of very little funds to a very different country, a very distant country, about which you know very little? So it's ways of mobilizing a shared memories, introducing a shared memories that help to explain and rationalize why you're doing this. Second, the call for reconnection elevated the status of antiquity as an object of historical study, and especially the status of transnational antiquity. Within China, Asia-Africa became a new division of area studies. These Asia-Africa institutes, set up by the Communist Party and also at Beijing University, fostered new historical research based on new archaeological and philological studies of China's connected past. And much of the scholarship that came out of this period is actually still used. And so it's part of the infrastructure of how we continue to study things like the Silk Road today. So, for example, in 1965, Zhang Tieshan, who was the head of the Communist Party's Institute of African Studies, he published the first monograph devoted to the history of the connections, the communications between China and Africa. And again, it took this model that we've seen already in its sort of closing moments of how Zhenghe visited East Africa, then there was colonialism, and then we have the renewed relations. But the mainstay of this scholarship was really going back over archaeological and literary works and creating new kinds of histories of China's connections. Ji Xianlin, who some of you will be familiar with, is China's leading Sanskritist, who wrote these new histories of Sino-Indian cultural relations going back all the way to the sort of the epics, the Indian epics, and looking especially at Indian influences on China historically. And then Shanghai, who was the editor of this series that is still running of historical records of China's relations with the outside world. He was someone who exemplifies a shift in the orientation, in the geopolitical orientation of the way that people did what we might call now connected history. Before Bandung, in the 1920s and 30s, he translated the work of European scholarship on China's relations with the outside world and introduced this genre that's now called jiaozhongshi, or history of history of what one might call connected history, communications history, connected history, and that was based on European scholarship and focused on China's relationship with Europe. After 1955, she helped to reorient the ways in which these histories were written, that looked especially at China's Indian Ocean ties with East Africa and as well as the Middle East and other parts of Asia. So there was a different orientation. And at the time when the mainstream Marxist-Maoist scholarship focused on the stages, finding the chronological stages of China's national past, so slavery to feudalism, capitalism, and so forth. This was a different, somewhat non-aligned set of academic studies that placed a premium, that saw as important to China's history this feudal era transnational commerce with India and all these other places. It was somehow an exception to the focus, even through the early Cultural Revolution, allowed this writing about foreign relations in the feudal period in a slightly different way. And this was due to this non-aligned third world diplomacy. So this is another aspect of what was going on in China's historiography. Now, one question on this, I'll end with this, more or less, is where did this kind of push to look at these histories of China's relations with the outside world and this narrative, the sort of anti-colonial narrative of thinking about the importance of China's relations with the outside world as being something that was before colonialism, but it's also important for the post-colonial future. The most important, the two places that seem important, China's influence from Indian scholarship and Arabic scholarship, I think to a lesser degree. I think the Indian scholarship seems so far to me to be the most important. Most importantly, this trope of reconnection appears already, as many of you know, probably less effective than I, with Tagore's visits to China. In the 1920s, as you have a temple nearby where there is a picture carved on the rock of an Indian monk or sage who came to this country centuries ago. My friends have come to you to reopen the channel of communication, which I hope is still there. This trope of a closed channel that needs to be reopened is there. And then the emblematization of Xuanzang, and I see you have the, I have it over there, you have it over there, the Institute of Chinese Studies. This elevation, and this is the painting, I'm not sure you can see it very well, that was commemorating towards a visit of Xuanzang, of this monk, is part of this something that seems to have helped to shape the narrative trope that enters China. Looking more closely, Nehru's glimpses of world history and the discovery of India, that was translated right after Bandung, again elevates Xuanzang and lists, there are many episodes in those works that catalogue the trade and religious relations between China and India in this pre-colonial period, sort of elevates them. Hanukkah is another interesting case. Obviously, China's first ambassador to China, and he's interesting because his earlier historical work on the Indian Ocean and on Vasco da Gama, and the importance of this pre-colonial and the importance of this colonial shift in thinking about connected history is something that in his book India and China, that model of thinking about geopolitical history and connected history in this way is that he brings into this discussion of what happens in the case of India and China. So there's that kind of orientation of the Indian Ocean and then the sort of this overland and Silk Road history that come into a single joint narrative. It seems to be important here. Hanukkah is also an interesting figure that also shows the way in which the simple model of the Iron Curtain that I've been mapping out, it doesn't fully work. There are exceptions, as with Japan, so India is the other one. So Hanukkah, for example, he's on the advisory committee for the UNESCO Mutual Appreciation of Eastern and Western Cultural Values. It happens at the same time as this Bandung moment. And UNESCO at that time, China, the People's Republic, was not a member of the UN. And this kind of project that included the translation of Asian works, but didn't include Africa and didn't include China. So it's a different project. But Hanukkah was also on that advisory committee. They were talking about the need to rethink this Orientalism, basically. So he's an interesting figure because he's part of both sides there. And again, he has this elevation of this Buddhist tide as the symbol of China's India's first cooperation. So I'll end with that and just bring us back to a summary of the basic points that, as I've been showing you, that the Silk Road, that as I've been talking about it today, is a modern political idea and set of narratives. During the Cold War, there were these two sets of Silk Road ideas that India seems to have straddled both in many ways. And finally, this Silk Road, Afro-Asian Silk Road, disappears in 1971. There are subtle ways that it comes up in Chinese media now and again, but it's not there in official discourse, and certainly the memory's been forgotten in Western media. So my aim today is not to argue that the Belt Road Initiative draws on either Richthofer's colonial Silk Road or the Afro-Asian anti-colonial Silk Road, but simply to highlight the historicity and multi-sided complexity of the term Silk Road, as well as that narrative call for revival that we still have today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tamara. I think it was an excellent account of the evolution and journey of an idea in the Silk Road, beginning with the German geographer Richthofer's ideas, moving on to the pre-World War concepts, then Bandung, and finally Belt and Road Initiative. I think it was really very interesting, and I'll just make one point that it clearly shows that India and China have a connected history, a shared history, which gets overshadowed by the nation's national histories and the nation state plans. Thank you once again. Now there was a Q&A.
Yes.
Anyone is free to ask any questions. Yeah.
Well, I'm completely overwhelmed because, as fragments of what you have said, in fragments, a lot of it is in our consciousness, and yet there is so much in the subconscious. And all of this come together, so the vista is really huge, and one almost feels that one needs to start studying it. And my first thought is, by the end of it, how the idea has evolved over centuries from antiquity to now, and how it is being at the current time of the state, it's being propagated by, let's say, China. I would still feel, even in that context, that there are Sikh bonds and Sikh bonds. There is much really one Silk Road, even in the ideas, and definitely not on the ground. Because I think the driving forces have also changed over history as to what it was and what it is now. But this is not a question also, this is just my, my reaction, response to it. I feel that as it stands today, I mean, there is a lot of, what should I say, a lot of debate about how the BRI has come into its present state and how it is being propagated, how it is being perhaps used as a strategy, this, that and the other. But I think by the end of it, I feel whatever the constraints of the present nation states may be at this point of time, especially in and around China, India, but I think China has made a great effort at contextualizing Silk Road in the present context and trying to use it for the contemporary purposes.
Yeah. That is a good point. I think, for people like me who study, my first book is on the ancient Silk Road. So for people like me, it's also, I think it elevates the level of interest in these sorts of questions. And you're right, there is a complexity there that enables one to engage both ancient and modern debates.
You mentioned that Silk Road was not very much mentioned in the Indian discourse. Because I'm now translating a book for the Spanish exchange culture, how trade shaped the world, which is one very good research.
Splendid exchange.
How trade shaped the world, written by William Bernstein. So yeah, William Bernstein. They mentioned a lot about the Silk Road. So they mentioned that actually, yes, of course, Silk Road was covered the India subcontinent, but China was the exporter of the silk, so that's why it's called Silk Road. But India was also an exporter of the incense. So that's why maybe, I'm not sure whether in Indian context, maybe there's another word called incense road. Yeah, I don't know. So because it seems to me that, the spice road.
The spice road, the paper road.
Yeah. So since China was the exporter of the silk, so maybe China, the Silk Road by its nature was, I guess,
exotic creative.
yeah, no, so that's the question. Another is saying that so now it's like what is happening to the BRI is like everything comes together on the BRI, no matter whether it comes from the government's initiatives or just the private enterprise's behavior. So I think the same thing also happened to this kind of Silk Road. So like when we talk about the Silk Road, what does it mean? Does it mean the infrastructure, the road itself, or it just mean the road of the silk? Because actually along that road there are a lot of things were exchanged between the East and the South. And also does this, since you mentioned that a lot of like countries, including China and also the other countries in Asia and Africa, you mentioned the Silk Road. Does it mean that, and particularly the Asia-African London Conference, does it symbolize, because like the Silk Road was at the pace of the peaking time of Asian countries in the Asian civilization, so does it symbolize the weakening of the Asian identities? How is it?
So the question is, does it
symbolize? All these countries, they mention this Silk Road concept, particularly after the London Conference. Does it mean that the Silk Road symbolized the weakening of the Asian identities?
Let me take that back, to take your last question first. So your question is, if I might repeat it, is after Bandung, the use of the term Silk Road by China and its partner countries, for example, it was basically Pakistan, Syria, Afghanistan, and then later, around 1971, it's Turkey and Iran. So the question is,
It was like the Silk Road, the peak time of the Silk Road. The thriving time of the Silk Road was at the sense case with all those thriving time of the Asian countries, African population civilizations. And the Bandung Conference was perceived as the timing that all the Asian countries, African countries, they have weakened their own identities. They have rebuilt their own thriving histories. So the use of the Silk Road, particularly after Bandung Conference, is that because all these countries have weakened their own identities? So that's why they do this.
No, I don't think. I think it was used as both the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean history was not. It was seen as a expression or a shared idea that symbolized Afro-Asian solidarity. So a new strength based on an ancient strength. So in the rhetoric, in the representation, in literary and diplomatic discourse, it was seen something good. So I think there's that. Yes, there are many different terms for talking about China's Indian relationship with India and the problem with the Tea Road. There are lots of different ways of thinking about why the Silk Road was or wasn't used. I think there's a set of technical reasons that has to do with these early geographers who were interested really in that Afghanistan, Pakistan, Central Asia set of routes. And that China was, the people who were using the term were affected by the translations of this European geographer, even after Bandung, even though they implied the term in a new way. So I think there's a sort of technical use of the term, and in the present it's part of it. Thank you.
You did mention that apart from trade, there is also cultural relations, and you were interaction also taking place. Now, there was a lecture at Professor where we talked about, not only recently, not only since this term Silk Road came into existence, but even 1,000 years earlier and more. Along these areas, there were manuscripts, Chinese Buddhist manuscripts, most of them in Sanskrit language, but some in indigenous languages also, which have been found somewhere, in tatters, one part there, one part there. So she was referring to this, this interaction, religious interaction, Buddhist interaction, along this route, many years back, many centuries back. I thought I just mention this.
Yeah, no, so the reference to the Dunhuang caves in Western China is a very good one because it's now associated with the term Silk Road. Because many people, including Shenzhen, pass through this region, and it contains tens of thousands of manuscripts that Valerie Hansen has, and most of them are Sanskrit. Actually, well, Sanskrit and Chinese were most, but also Cantonese, Hebrew, Manichaean, and many different literatures. And what's interesting is when they were discovered, I mentioned this briefly in 1901, 1900 onwards, by a set of larger European scholars, and they're now spread across the world, is they didn't use the term Silk Road back then. It's only from the 1950s onwards that it became associated with those sets of terms. So nowadays, when we think of the Silk Road, that's exactly what we think. Okay, I'll submit to you. But thank you. That's a very good point.
And this was many centuries back, possibly 10,000 years and earlier.
Yeah.
So, and the Sanskrit language was there, and even if it was a local language also, you would see the impact of the Sanskrit language.
Absolutely. So the cave was closed in 1000 CE, and this is the caves look like this. This is a modern dance that's taking place with the background of these cave murals, and in them is found these manuscripts. And there's a huge influence of Sanskrit on ancient Chinese literature.
What of the Sanskrit works which have been translated into Chinese? It could be retranslated in some way, because the Sanskrit works are lost to us.
There is that.
A lot of it is lost, we don't know. So from that, probably it was translated back into some Indian languages, we learn much more about ancient India. But I don't find any evidence.
It's true, and one of the issues is that a lot of the Sanskrit texts, most of them are Buddhist texts that already know, so they're copies of other texts. But you're absolutely right, there are other texts out there.
There are also texts on Indian grammar, by Honey and all.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I think
So linguistics, I think a small chunk of it is also by linguistics.
thank you. So I think that would be wonderful.
Not only Sanskrit, even Pali language.
And Kharosthi as well.
Yeah.
So that's an important place for future collaboration. Oh yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, yes.
One just query map that was shown last
Yes.
that should be available with Indian Council of
When Asian Relations Conference.
So that's the venue.
We have one person from SW right here.
So we can help you locate
Gutian will join on Monday, so you have two sources over there to tap.
So it should be possible to locate that map. This map, yeah. Map which was, there is a lot of, this was a very important map.
Yeah.
Also became very controversial. Because Taiwan was shown, Taiwan and Tibet both
Okay.
were shown as separate entities in that map.
PRC people did like it.
Yeah, so PRC delegation, they were
Like-
well, at that time they didn't have PRC.
PRC wasn't there, but-
Kuomintang, ROC. During boycott, but
They walked out there from the stadium.
Flag was also removed.
I think they should be able to locate you. I have, two queries. One query about the use of the term spatially within China. You can see that post Afro-Asian conference in October, this term was used frequently with refer to Malcolm's remarks.
Yes.
The first Asian African writers conference in Ashkan. He referred to famous. I wanted to ask whether before Pantun this term was already being used within China or it started happening after that?
So,
What was our ambassador to China in 2014 and 17?
I feel very humbled, so feel free to correct me on anything. So before Bandung, so in the 90s, the earliest that I found was 1929, the Chinese translation of Old Latin or the geographer, his caravan routes in Asia, in his journal he was at. And in that it uses two different terms. It uses star and it also uses paraphrase. And also this is a comic exactly star. And also commonly it used soy, so the so-called soy. And with inverted commas to say it's the so-called Silk Road. And actually all the way through, and I didn't mention this, all the way through 71, when it appears in Chinese newspapers, it's still with this.
When did they finally sort of took ownership of it?
Not really until this period. You see, this is interesting. So
After the 1970s.
yeah, but although they're continually using it, so this period really, that this particular rule really only comes up here. Maybe once or twice I found it in Shinbao, in the sort of 1920s, 1930s journal. But it used many different terms, many paraphrases. And even the Chinese collaborators with Sven in the 1930s and 40s, he's the person who wrote the Silk Road, they use paraphrases. So it really wasn't. They use these various different terms. So it's really the first time that it starts getting stamped. The first time it actually appears is in a translation in 1955 or 1956 of an Afghan geographer's account that was published in the People's Daily of Chinese relations with Afghanistan. So it actually comes out of a Chinese translation of an Afghan geographer. And after that, they start talking about China-Afghan relations as this renewal of the Silk Road. So there's something that's going on in translation at that time, and then it becomes standardized in all state newspapers, all these other papers as well. So it's very strange.
And they took ownership of the idea
In the 80s.
In the 80s, there's ownership in the sense that the inverted commas disappeared. Yes.
Until the time they took ownership in its present form.
So this is because the silk was used, because it was the main product of the
Yes.
and it had some other thing. From it would
You know, until it was someone else's description.
Yes.
Then it became their own preferred characterization.
Exactly.
This brings me to my second question. You know, today, in context of Italy, clearly China is the hub.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's the central point. We look at the maps, the map shows both maritime dimension of Silk Road and continental aspect of Silk Road, both emanate from China.
Yes.
Now, when you look at Silk Road's historical context, is that centrality already there, or it's more a shared cultural space?
So that's another good question. Then again, it has to do with this issue of the modern idea, because there were trade routes and networks at different times in different regions, configured in different ways. So the idea of calling any one configuration, any moment in time, the Silk Road, has to be a construct. To say that this is a Silk Road, you're immediately freezing it in a moment in time and ignoring some kinds of connections. I mean, it's like this issue of religious versus cultural versus trade. What counts as the real Silk Road trade? If you're just focusing on silk, that's a different map. But something called this Silk Road that looks, something like all these things that you commonly see in any book, that generally does put China in at the center, not because China was at the center of all this trade, but because it's a term that's become associated, especially from its very beginnings, with digital, from the penny, and so forth, as a way of talking about China's connected history. Though in the times of India, I have found the use of the Silk Route in relationship to India and Iran and Central Asia, but not commonly. So it's the use of it changes depending on where you're looking at the sort of archive and at what point in time. So it's not a very good answer, but that's the sort of the empirical answer from looking at the archive. Does that make sense?
To what extent silk was a major merchandise along Silk Road?
Say that again?
Whether or not silk
Was a major Silk
merchandise.
Road? Was it a major merchandise along Silk Road? Because for smart area.
Yeah, exactly. I was just looking at the notes
He
of this
delivered,
lecture.
he delivered leadership of the lecture. And he also talked about the concept.
I've given this talk to Mark Elliott, so I think
His argument was that actually one that it gained currency much later in China, and he started really taking ownership of this in the 80s, not before that.
That's what
You also confirmed that. You have many more earlier references to Sichochiru than what
direct kind of reference.
yeah, no, I think
Secondly, he was arguing that silk was more currency along Silk Road rather than a product which was straight up.
Yeah, not necessarily. Commodities were not huge in number.
Because numbers were limited, very limited.
yeah. So I mean, I think this is also Valerie Hanson's point: is that my first book is on the Han Dynasty period, so the amount of trade, the trade was, this goes back to the question, is it state organized trade or is it sort of merchant free trade? I think, Larry Hanson's argument is there's very little trade, it was mainly diplomatic, embassies, political gifts to Central Asia of the silk. And then, famously there's an account of the envoy finding illicit trade, non-state governed trade in the Han Dynasty between southern China and India. That, again, that's not what the Silk Road came to refer to, because in the 20th century, it became useful for the Silk Road to be seen as state-sponsored trade, state-organized trade. But then, if one looks at it from a historical, sort of academic point of view, then yes, there was already trade happening in these other areas, but the quantity seems to be, from the archaeological perspective, very limited, especially if you're talking about individual traders. From the perspective of the amount of coinage that's found and so forth, it seems very limited. And then it depends at what period you're looking at. It's good to think about.
It's very interesting that we are we had Mark Elliott on this similar subject.
Talking about this?
Yeah, I think you are approaching it completely differently. And yet scholars are looking at the antiquity and how the idea has evolved. So which is a great thing.
So he's talking about the 1980s or 1880s.
He's talking about how the idea came currency in the 1980s.
See, that is only through UNESCO. I didn't talk about this.
Yeah.
That's, I think, probably what he's talking about. And
Yeah.
also the and then the China's cultural diplomacy, which I didn't. I've given this talk to Mark Elliott, so
He wasn't touching upon the 100 years before, or that not that much, except of course he went through the route of defining how the term came into being and all that. But he wasn't talking about the connections as in detail. He's in a larger Afro-Asian, Eurasian kind of context, as you did. That is absolutely the way you look at it.
Any other? Young people.
So when you say, sorry, as the young people,
it takes time.
when is the book about to be out?
So I still have a ways to go, probably in a couple of years. I haven't, it's also about I don't know, I just have to do other sections. It's not just, it's about the broader stakes of what this sort of is just one framework. I was thinking about transconnected history. But as you pointed out, it's always associated with China as center. I'm interested in what other frameworks and thinking about connected history are. So
We are about to do, sorry, I'm talking about at this point. We are about to do a very interesting conference next year. Looking at travels and travelers as in the 20th century mostly. But through the travels and travelers, see the connected histories of India and China. The transformation that takes place. So if you're passing by, sometimes you're not sure next year. I'm already booking my
To say something for my interest. In case you want to do a research, you want to publish something now, send it to China.
thank you very much. Thank you so much.
If you can, one of your chapters of your book, research paper.
Thank you very much. I've also been interested in looking at Sri Aurobindo and Sri Pancha. So I was Sri Pancha was one of the disciples of Sri Aurobindo. So I met that in
I just picked up a book in memory of Shivansh. Some scholars have written together about his contributions in Persian.
Say something else.
I think I said plenty. I'm still thinking about the questions I received. But, thank you again for this.
Okay, so anybody else? You have one?
Ma'am, I have a bit of a pop culture question. So there's this Netflix show called the Marco Polo, which is actually set in Mongolia. Now, it is during the reign of Kublai Khan. So what we see is that China was very protective of its silkworms were not in any way allowed to move out of China. So the whole terminology of it's fiction, yes, but you know the whole movies, everything is depicting that China and Mongolia are very protective of the silk. They in the very old years, so in ancient times. So how is that the we identify the silk route as a trade route? So what is the relevance of actually silk in the whole process of trade? Because the popular culture depicts as that silk actually didn't get to the rest of the world. So
that's a I think the legend goes that then a tongue lady hid the cocoons in her hair and smuggled them out. So, I mean, there are various ways in which one can explain what happens in popular myth. But I think this gets back to the question: how much silk did actually travel out? I was just reading Jixianlin has a volume there on some history of China-India relations, and he has a whole essay there about silk. And well, you're also talking about Indian silk and Chinese silk, and then the traffic in the translation of the terms around silk. And that's one way of thinking, not just about I'm not a social science person as and I think one of the things that he focuses on is the sort of cultural meanings of silk and the kinds of associations that travel with silk. And so I think in your example, it's interesting that it's precisely these popular symbols that are out there, Marco Polo, Kublai Khan, silk, that emblematize this Silk Road passage between East and West, and the kinds of conflict and secrecy that is also part of an epoch. I think that one can trace those kinds of tales and the popularization in the West, outside China, but then also later in China, to the post-19, especially the post-1945 period in the West. You get the sort of the tales of the European spy who goes to Central Asia, Mongolia, these places. Those kinds of adventure stories, movies, there's a whole catalog of the novels, the movies that come out, that then lead up to a Netflix show like Marco Polo. So you can kind of trace back in time the literary genres and where they come from. If you go back even further, the Beethoven who has that map there, at that time, again, it was geographers who were the ones who were using this term Silk Road. And even at that time, you get in these novels about European spies and geographers using this term Silk Road in the West. So one can trace all the way back to the late 19th century these kinds of literary narratives and the kinds of plot motifs of who the hero is, the adventurer, the Buddhist monk, the archaeologist, the spy, those kinds of typical, the traveler, those are the typical figures in something called Silk Road fiction. So thank you. That's not a problem.
Anybody else?
Why did he refer to these two colony and others? Mariners.
That's right.
Why did he say Silk Road of Mariners?
That's right. Why? So the question is why Marinus? Let me just. So Marinus was a geographer whose work is primarily preserved within Ptolemy's geography. So most of Marinus' there isn't a book of Marinus. So Marinus' work is preserved in Ptolemy, but the reason why he mentions Marinus is because there's a moment in Ptolemy's geography, if you look at his edition. So his Marinus of Tyre, so current day, so Asia Minor, so Syria, Lebanon, that area. Ptolemy, and so there were Greek-speaking Asians, actually, and Egyptians. So let me just remind you again more. So basically, there's a point in which Marinus says in Ptolemy's geography, the problem with these traders. So this, in Greek, the term seres, S-E-R-E-S, literally means the bringers of silk. Ser is silk in Greek, and it means the bringers of silk. So the Seres, exactly. So the easternmost point in Greek geography is the land of the Seres, which probably refers to India, actually, or at the edge of India and China. It was then, in the 19th century, matched with China. So Serica, it's the land of Serica that he sees as the easternmost part of Greek and Roman knowledge. The problem is Marinus' knowledge comes from merchants who, he says, exaggerate their reports in order to inflate the prices of their goods. So what Ptolemy does is say, let's reduce by half Marinus' distances that he gives me for my geography of the world. Because Ptolemy's aim was to calculate the longitudinal distance of the known world. And so he's the reason why we have longitude and latitude is due to Ptolemy. He introduced that, and that was taken up in European Renaissance cartography. So he's a very important geographer, but he didn't know enough about the easternmost point of the world. And this is why the Seres become important, because they were the easternmost point of the Greco-Roman world. And Bishop comes in and says, Ptolemy's figures are all wrong. Marinus was wrong, Ptolemy's halving of his calculations are wrong, we need to look at Chinese geography. So he looks at the Han Dynasty, Sima-Qian's work, the Han Shu's, Han Dynasty annals, which also include distances between cities. If you read them, he combines them and says, well, actually, let's correct Ptolemy. And that's what the blue and the red, I'm sorry, I seem to have lost the connection. That's what the blue and the red on the map is shown as a correction. And actually, what I didn't mention is that Central Asia had not been fully mapped at this time. So Klishov was an explorer, and so he was actually using, and at that time, a Muslim Khanate had been set up in Central Asia there, so he couldn't go there. So he used ancient geography in order to recalculate the modern world map, which he needed for this railway. So this is where this whole Silk Road comes from. So he associated the Silk Road with Ptolemy and Marinus, and it's only afterwards that now actually refers entirely to China. And it's seen as a Chinese thing. So it's that weird.
At that time it was not.
So it almost got approached from the opposite side, in a way.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It's a strange history.
And for completely colonial purposes, these whole railways, they were long.
That's right. And competitive colonial. So there is a great game, as for a buffer state, misinformation.
Some research from Silk Road goes high-speed railroad. Bring me to
Serious is term is used by Ptolemy.
That's right. Sarah.
So this idea of Silk Road actually maybe it dates back to. Would that be?
So if you read the Ptolemy, because my first degree is actually in classics, it's the distance to Sarah metropolis, which is the capital of basically the Sarah. There's no term in there for the Silk Road, but he is calculating the distance in a table from all the way to Sarah metropolis, which is the easternmost point. So yes, in some ways, in that case, it's the road to the people of the city. So yeah, actually that's one way of rethinking it, that it is there.
All right, if there are no more questions and queries. We thank Dr. Tamara for a very enlightening afternoon.
Thank you very much.
45 degrees Celsius and enriching ourselves intellectually. So we wish you all the best for your book.
Thank you so much.
We hope when you are about to finish, you can come again and maybe.
No, she will come in next year.
Oh, she's somewhere else. She's booked for
My itinerary organized.
Okay, great. And so,
And actually very persistent.
Thank you, hospitality.
thanks to all of you.
How is it?
Now,